We are live, sir. Take it away.
Bueno. Oh, I am hosting today.
Yeah.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Bienvenidos to another episode of the South Star Classroom. I am Omar Yanar. We got the beard of knowledge with us, the beard of wisdom, Mr. David Castillo. Brother, how you doing today?
I'm good. Good. Busy. But the weather is like turning into that classic. You know, every time you come to San Diego, I think the weather is kind of not so good. But it's perfect now, man. It's perfect.
So what you're trying to tell me is come into San Diego.
You got to come back. Yeah, you got to come back.
I got to get back into San Diego. That's awesome, man. I was just in Washington, D.C., and the weather was absolutely amazing. And it was spring, and like stuff was blooming. It was gorgeous out there.
Yeah.
So for our folks, Miss Jubilee Ransom, who I got to see in DC live, I got to see her, man, in the real IRL, as the kids say, man. I got to see her and hang out with her for an afternoon, which was awesome. She'll be here in about 15 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. And then just sending all our love to the doc, the real doc, Dr. Charles Cole. He won't be able to join us today. He's doing secret missions, secret ass missions. So, as Jubilee would love, we got like just quick check-ins, man. Other than the weather, what you got going on, Mr. David Castillo?
We are, as you know, we're transitioning to high school next year. Son's going to be in the 9th grade.
Oh,
and we had what amounts to a transition meeting. So like his middle school case manager, they kind of hand you over to the new team. So it's actually a cool thing that they do. And I think it's mandatory when you go between grade levels. But I'm telling you, man, I knew what it was, but they never sent us an official like documentation, like a prior written notice, or there was no documentation. And I had to ask them in the middle of it. I was like, is this an actual IEP meeting or is this a check-in? Because they're talking about making changes to the IEP, and they had somebody from the district on.
For our audience, what's an IEP?
Is an individualized education plan for students with that have identified as needing special education services. They learn in different ways. And so, I was like, I can't believe this is happening. You guys, you messed this up. And then they're trying to say, we don't think your kid's going to need this in high school. I'm like, how do you know? You've never met him, right? They're just trying to kind of water down his IEP. And at one point, I just had to shut the whole thing down. I was like, listen, some of you don't know me. I've got 25 years in education experience. I was a principal for 10 years, a teacher for this many years. Like I know what's happening here, and it's not good. So I'm not going to sit here and listen to you all complain about the state of special education in the USA and how big your caseload is. This is about my kid. So let's refocus. Okay. I hate doing that, man, but I had to do it.
Yeah, man. You pulled some rank, man. How was that taken?
I think they got it. Things sort of changed after that. And we got through the meeting, and I was like, I just imagine like if you're a parent that doesn't know what's happening, then things happen to you.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And you don't know what's legal, what's not. And that's kind of where my head went. I'm like, these people are like, this is what they do. Right. They got us into a meeting with more people than I expected. All of a sudden somebody's there from the district. She tried to shut it down too, because she knew it was messed up. So it was just a cluster. And it made me think about the parents that don't know how to navigate those spaces. So that's what happened yesterday.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's what Doc always says, right? Like, we're out here by ourselves. And if we're not educated as to the processes, if we're sitting here being in an administrative meeting and they're using information and the availability of information to their power and almost relying on a contingency of ignorance. Like this is how
Exactly,
people absolutely
man.
manipulate parents in a way that is super, like I would say, not just unethical, but just like, yo, bro, like that's borderline illegal stuff. But
Mhm.
there's no way to know unless you know, unless you have that
Yeah,
information. Another reason everyone should listen to the South Star Classroom.
crazy.
We need to do a whole like SPED episode.
We do. We do. Yeah,
Like what
that'd
is
be great,
SPED?
man.
What are the various
Yep.
areas of learning disabilities? Kind of just like a bit of like a technical conversation with some storytelling about like, yo, man, like
Yeah.
here's how to
Focus on like
navigate that landscape.
parent rights, student rights, all that stuff, man. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, man, I'm writing that down. So parent rights and
Yeah.
student rights. Very good.
Yep.
So for our end, man, we'll have Jubilee come in and she'll give her very glowing situation. I will say to KJ Freeman, what's up, man? Thank you for that. Is there a way the topic of discussion can be included in the
Yeah.
titles? Absolutely. And Dr. Charles Cole actually did that for us, which is
Well, I
badass.
mean
Like we
that
highlight.
I think what they're asking for, I think what KJ Freeman is asking for, and it's a great question. Um, I'll just be straight up with you. It comes down to time. And while we know what we're going to kind of cover, sometimes the details don't come together, before we create the stream, and then you have to and then it's hard to do it at that point. So basically, we have to get ahead of that. That's what that question is there. But I appreciate it.
I think we should, because then people can be more prepared for the
Yep.
show so that they
Yep.
can do some research and kind of chime in. Because
Yeah. Or
actually, like today, yeah, it's
or
more
just like
organic, right?
invite other people if it's like a particular subject. Be like, hey, they're going to be talking about this, or like it's something that they're just not interested in, so they can kind of pass on it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm with you.
For our audience today, and I'm excited to have Jubilee join us a bit. I got to actually see her in real life this past week up in Washington D.C. She is doing very well. She's glowing. She is excited about the work that we're up to, and then like we just got to have like a real discussion, like people to people. And DC is like a lovely place this time of year, man. Lovely place.
Yeah.
Just like a
Cherry
fascinating
blossoms.
place, though, man. Cherry blossoms are done. There's still some
Okay.
trees that are still like cherry blossoming. Not many. They're all pretty much in full bloom. But it's apropos to our discussion today that I was
Yep.
in Washington D.C. So what are we talking about today? I want to set the kind of platform, but I want to share with our audience. Like we're so excited that y'all are here. I'm excited because I want you to chime in. There's going to be some storytelling that David and I are going to do. And I want to hear David's, like, he's probably got 1,000 stories, particularly for question 2. And I may actually push that up a little bit. But I want our audience to really chime in the comments section as much as possible, even sharing a couple snippets about some of the things that have happened to them in this topic. So apropos of going to DC, the way this whole show kind of came about was that I was watching the show Manhunt on Apple TV. And if you don't know, Manhunt is this absolutely cool show that's based off of a book that I'm now reading about the hunt for John Wilkes Booth after the assassination of President Lincoln. Now, you would think the show is just about hunting him down, and a lot of it is, but the show really brought together how Lincoln's cabinet, particularly Edwin Stanton, who was his Secretary of War at the time. There was no Secretary of Defense, so the Secretary of War became the Secretary of Defense. I'm trying to remember when that shifted. Was that like, I don't know, like maybe World War I or World War II, where like that shifted? I'd have to look it up. But the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, not only led the hunt for John Wilkes Booth, but was essentially like trying to uncover a conspiracy as high as Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, in a better attempt to dismantle the Union had the Union won. But what it did is got me thinking about Lincoln's cabinet. And I wound up visiting Ford Theater for the first time. I was kind of hesitant. That is the theater that President Lincoln was assassinated in. I was always hesitant to go because I didn't want to glorify something extraordinarily tragic historically. But having learned about the aftermath of the chase for John Wilkes Booth after learning the aftermath of the cabinet. I thought it was an interesting tour to have in order to better kind of understand the comprehensive nature of how the cabinet, after Lincoln's death, started working very vigorously to implement the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution, which respectively ended slavery, created the Equal Rights, which is the 14th Amendment, and the ability for African American males, or any male of any race, to vote, the 15th Amendment, which got me thinking about a book called Team of Rivals. So if you have not read Team of Rivals, ladies and gentlemen, I highly, highly, highly encourage you all to read it. It's an exceptional book. The book is basically how President Lincoln assembled all of his rivals. So all these dudes, Edwin Stanton, Seward, his attorney general, who's I'm forgetting their name right now, they all basically were running for the presidency at the same time. And Lincoln kind of unexpectedly in 1860 won. And kind of, you know, when back in the day when people won the presidency, they would basically praise their friends, high levels of nepotism, and punish their enemies. And Lincoln did the exact opposite. He brought all of those kind of political rivals into his cabinet. The idea being they have foresight, ideologies, and abilities radically different from his. They're not going to be yes people. And this is the team that he needed to basically keep the Union together, which was his foremost goal during the beginning of the Civil War. By the way, this is a misconception. Lincoln was not an abolitionist. Lincoln was not a let's emancipate the slaves person or candidate at all in any way, shape, or form during his presidential candidacy in 1860. That started taking a radical turn during the Civil War, and several meetings he had with Frederick Douglass, by the way, where he then was like, oh, we actually need to emancipate African Americans in this country and do something about this. So that was one of the things that like this cabinet kind of helped push that wasn't necessarily on his agenda. So today's show, ladies and gentlemen, is about teams. Because if there is a lesson that I want anyone to learn, everyone to learn about leadership, is that we have the misconception of like the strong person leader. And we see it, man. We see it with like these like diabolical dictators across our country. Or excuse me, across this country, sure. But like across the world. We got, Orban in Hungary, right? We've got diabolicalness in Turkey. We've got clearly the shit that's going on in Russia. We've got a resurgence of this hard right-wing dictatorship mentality that I personally think like Trump is very much about. Like not think, definitively is. He is a dictator and a tyrant and ultimately is out to ensure that like American democracy fails. And a lot of people think that's what leadership is. It's decisiveness and like this person, and we just need one person making decisions. And it's like true leadership, in my opinion, is contingent on two major factors. The first is that the leader understands an essential lesson. And I share this with everybody that I can. I share this with my team. Leadership and power is contingent on understanding that power is a responsibility to others and not to be used advantageously for yourself. So I'll repeat that. Power, the way it works, the way it should work, is that it is a responsibility to uplift and empower others, and is not to be used advantageously for the self. That is how you get fascists. That is how you get dictators, because the power then corrupts. But if you have that mindset that my power is going to be used to empower and uplift others, that is truly how power should be utilized. The second is that this like misconception that the leader does it all. We got this misconception that like Elon Musk is like this like all powerful like oracle of technology, and like Pinchy Bezos like invented Amazon, and like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. I'm like, Bill Gates fucking stole that operating system from Steve Jobs and Apple. Like all Bill Gates did was steal a great idea, institutionalize its structure, make it his own. However, Who is the team behind Microsoft that has made all the other like incredibly valuable products? Steve Jobs essentially stole the operating system from Xerox, by the way, who truly invented the operating systems that we currently work with. I don't know if you all know that, but like, can you disparage the incredible team at Apple that has designed all of the technology that we have? Meaning, the truth of leadership is in the team, not in the person. It is teams that bring things together. It is teams that design the structures, and the team very little time, very like minuscule amounts of time in American history are given credit. So it's always like Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King. It's like, oh, Martina Luther King. It's like, no, man, there was like hundreds of thousands of people that were part of that were working as leaders to institutionalize civil rights. I saw you at the tip of your tongue, David. You want to jump in on here?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Keep going.
Okay. So the topic is simple, and I want everyone to chime in today. It is about teams. How do we celebrate teams? How do we build teams? How do we talk about teams? Because I want everyone to walk away from this podcast basically understanding that leaders are like, leaders ain't shit without their team. And the team is instrumental in doing the radical work. And again, this was all based on Lincoln, and that team not only had to create all these things, but had to carry on that vision and institutionalize it after his death. And this is why we have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. But it's also why you see incredible organizations or incredible schools crumble when the leader is gone, because the leader did not do their job of empowering the team around them to take this responsibility on after their departure. So I want to ask our audience, you've been in teams before. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from David. What are some of the elements that make up a successful team? Like, where have you been part of a successful team, and where are some of the elements that you're like, oh yeah, like we had this, and this actually resulted in successful teamwork? So this is a pragmatic workshop today, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to learn some shit. What you got?
I mean, there's a lot that comes up, and I've been part of. I mean, I've led strong and effective teams. I've created strong and effective teams. I've also walked into very dysfunctional teams a number of times, and sometimes I made it out, and sometimes I didn't make it out. You know. And so I've experienced, and not all in the education setting. I think going back to thinking about going back to even my early work years, even being a teenager in my early 20s, into my 20s and 30s, and then when I got into education, I think some through lines, Omar, for me are an effective team is a team that is focused around a particular mission, right?
Oh yeah, I was just about to
and in
say
education,
that.
In education, we talk about missions and a mission statement and a vision statement, all that. Those things are all incredibly important. I think, especially in the charter space, we tend to see more of that. So I think there's this element of like, is this why you are here? And if it is, great, let's go. But if this thing doesn't resonate with you, then you're in the wrong place, right? And that also can apply to the private sector with particular organizations. I used to work for the Home Depot. When the Home Depot first started, we were like one of the first stores in the country, right? And the excitement around the brand and the energy from the top management to the middle management, more, daily team meetings and getting people pumped up and, excited about, going out and pushing carts in the hot sun and loading concrete in the back of trucks. But I was part of a team. I was part of an organization that I was excited about, right? There was a little buzz in the air. So I think those things for me, just in terms of big teams and small teams, I think there's a lot that I could say here, but I'll add one more.
There was buzz in the air, or you all were buzzed?
Both. Yeah.
It's excellent. It's excellent news.
Yeah.
Exactly the kind of team that I want to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think getting a little bit more granular, thinking about like maybe administrative teams or like leadership teams. Um, I think for me, what I've seen when I've walked in or when I've created um, strong teams, right, is when the teams were made up of people that complemented one another's skills, right? You didn't have too
Mhm.
much of this or too much of that or not any of this particular thing. So you had analytical thinkers, you have creative thinkers, you have people that are really good at like just organization, right? Like, can you put all of this stuff together so that you kind of build this like superhuman, right? It's made of all these different parts. You don't need you don't need too many creative people. You don't need too many analytical people. You need a good balance, right? So I think, the second piece is just creating teams that are diverse when it comes to what people are bringing to the table. And
Yeah, I mean, you remind me of like, I'll jump in really quickly. You remind me of this really cool thing that we do with our sixth graders, that we start with our leadership and character development. So, like El Paso Leadership Academy, do we teach leadership? Yes, we do. Like, how do we do that? Like,
Mhm.
it's a complicated story, but like
Yep.
the first thing that I think is incredibly important to leadership, and like just to know that you, like, I put my money where my mouth is this exercise that we do with sixth graders, and the adults love it, right? Because like everyone loves learning about themselves and especially about
Mhm.
others, right? Is the concrete component is self-awareness. Like, do you know who you are? Like, do you know how you work? Do you know what
Mhm.
kind of person that you are you like methodical and a planner? Are you kind of action orientated and more capricious? um,
Yeah.
are you very organized? So we do this thing with the kids where essentially we, with our sixth graders, and again I do this with the adults, so it's super fun. We give them all these cards, and it's just four cards, and it's a green card, a red card, a brown card, and a blue card. And the cards explain: you're a green, you're a planner, you're methodical, you do all of the
Mhm.
like concrete planning in terms of the group that you're in. However, you're not really that action orientated, right? Red is like excitement and like the adrenaline junkies. They don't plan. They just like throw caution into the wind and go out there and do all the things. But then there's no plan. So they, dude, like it's just like, oh shoot, we lost again, and we did not
We
have a
have we
plan,
have a
but
guest.
we learned.
We
We
have
have
a
a guest.
guest.
Okay.
Jubilee has entered the building.
Woo, woo.
Hello, my beautiful
How you doing?
people.
Hey, we got a
I'm
team now.
doing
Now we got a team.
wonderfully.
Yeah.
And we got a team. I like teams. Jude, we
Um,
did some check-ins, but like I can continue in a minute. We want to say hello
yeah.
to you and give you some space to say hello to the audience. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I had one of those days, so I was like juggling, even though I can't juggle in real life, but I do pretend. So here I am.
Mm,
I'm grateful. I don't know if Omar told you that we were like ripping and running in the streets of DC
I
indeed, we
heard. I
were.
heard.
about a week
Yeah.
ago.
That's great.
So that was
That's
lovely.
great.
So yeah, carry on. I'm excited about today's topic. Thanks for
All
your
That
right.
patience.
was crazy cool.
I
So
want to
what we were, yeah.
pull up this comment here real quick. So Bill is so there's definitely you know being I would say being a leader, creating teams, being a part of a team. There's definitely like you have to understand how to like unfortunately play politics, and I mean like understand politics, right?
Right.
How people move.
Yeah, team
You know,
dynamics, like the
yeah,
dynamics of
dynamics.
human interaction.
What is driving people? So I think we do see a lot of this in education spaces where you know self over service
Hmm.
and this concept of like loyalty. You said nepotism. These things are all very true and like active. And I think sometimes when school systems lose focus of serving children, these things are often at play, and
Yeah,
that's why those
100%.
things happen. But I'll just to like wrap this up. Every time I've been in a leadership position and any other kind of leaders that I've gravitated to or that have gravitated towards me tend to be more oriented in terms of service to others, right?
Yeah.
Service oriented, where it's like, maybe I'm in this position to run this school or to run this organization. That's wonderful. But my commitment is to building and creating a strong team. It's not about like advancement for me, because, we can all get hit by a bus one day. So I think that's the other thing about leadership, and I've been in several situations where I've walked into rooms or organizations or jobs when you clearly can see people are about self, and that drives behavior, and it's toxic and it's ugly. And you might be able to like create a team on paper in that environment, but it's really not going to be the kind of high functioning teams that diverse teams that we're talking about.
Yeah, man. Well said. And like, again, Team of Rivals, right? Team of Rivals was really about this ideology that like Lincoln put himself in this position to say, this is not about self. This is about the mission. What is the mission? Save the Union. What is the mission? 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. So it became about us putting ego aside, putting personal advancement aside, in this case, his own life aside, to say, how is this team collectively working for the greater good? And dude, I just had that conversation with a colleague today, verbatim of what you just said, that leaders in a position of personal advancement are always going to lead toxic cultures, because then that disseminates to everybody else. It's the leader that should absolutely be free of ego. You must have a non-egotistical leader. You must. And you must have a non-egotistical leader that is not only service-orientated, but empowerment-orientated. How do I work myself out of a job? That should be the goal. How do I work myself out of a job? I literally told my colleague today those words, that saying, my goal is to work myself out of a job so you don't need me. So either A, someone eventually takes my job, or B, this job doesn't even need to exist, because like every person is in perfect synchronicity with one another. And for that, it goes back to David's comment about like, dude, where are you going? Like mission and vision. And I'll end it here and then ask Jubilee. We're going to kind of close up this first question about what are some of the elements that make up a successful team, Jubilee, in saying, if you can do this, you're ahead of, I think, 80% of leaders, because I think leaders and people in general are extraordinarily disorganized, and their disorganization leads to catastrophe. If you can answer the question, who is doing what, by when, and how, and definitively know that across an organization. So what is everyone's, not just job titles, what are their responsibilities? These are the responsibilities. They're very direct, they're delineated. Great. Now, where's the accountability? How are you checking in with those folks and your team to understand who is doing what, by when, and how, so you don't have a duplication of efforts? So everyone understands, what is my small role in this larger vehicle? How do I know what everybody else is doing, which makes it even more exciting to be like, oh, this is how the puzzle pieces come together. They have to see how the puzzle builds itself together. Did we just kick Jubilee out of the chat? What happened?
She's got dropped. She got dropped. She'll come back. Yeah, she's back.
And this goes into like really quickly that exercise that I had where these teachers and these kids had these cards, like the green card, the brown card, the blue card, and you self-designate. Oh, I'm brown. I'm an organizer. Blue, I am sensitive and I'm people-orientated. Red, I'm action-oriented. Green, I'm planning. Meaning good teams are a composite of skill set, not necessarily expertise. People keep thinking it's about expertise. Well, they know about this, they know about this. That's important. But you really should be looking at, what are the elements of a great team? It's David said it already. What am I really good at? What are my skill sets? And how do I find people that complement that in ways of they have skill sets that I don't have, so that the puzzle comes together? I'm all wrapped up on that one. Jubilee, what you got for us? What do you think are some successful elements of a team?
If you hear the quacking, I know you guys are like, we can never hear her, but every time we get on the South Star classroom, she decides she wants to play with her little duck, and it's hilarious. So I guess it's a tribute to us. Successful teams, I think, first and foremost, they've got a clear mission, they've got a clear vision, and they have people galvanized around the mission and the vision. One of my favorite team builders is the team builder where folks get around a table, you give them some supplies, and you're like, all right, you got to build a boat. And the task seems almost impossible because it's like, how the heck am I going to build a boat? I got a straw, a paper clip, and a piece of cardboard, right? And it's like, you don't give any more information or direction about the activity. You just say what the purpose is. You got to build a boat, and these are the criteria, and that's that. And you hush and you watch people get to work. And it's one of the most magical things to watch because people figure it out. And the key is they figure it out together because there are no I's in team, and they realize we got to build a boat. We got 5 minutes to build a boat, and everyone gets. And I think that a successful team has a leader who is able to understand that there's no I in team, and there needs to be something that galvanizes us around a specific purpose. And of course, the vision as well. And then I always think, successful teams have a leader that's clear that there can be a group of people that work together at the same times and the same place, right? Or you can have a team, right? That they are not the same, right? I have worked in organizations where I have been a part of a group of people who work for the same organization and have meetings at the same time. And I have worked within organizations that were filled with teams. And so I think the difference is the galvanizing nature of mission, vision, and then aligned actions that are connected to the mission and vision. And then I think, on the more individual side, you got to have folks that are self-aware, have the ability to self-reflect, right? And then have the ability to act on whatever the learnings are from whatever feedback they gather. I think being able to kind of stomp out the ego really comes with the ability to listen, to really like hit the ground listening and instead of hitting the ground running. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
So for our listeners, man, chime in. And the next thing I want to hear about is like a little bit of storytelling, because I'm sure everybody has had this. And David mentioned it earlier. Like, when is the time that you were forced to work with like a terrible team, and like what made it so terrible? Sometimes it's important to understand the counterfactual. Like, when were we put in this situation where we're like, oh my God, like this was awful. We know why it was awful. And this is like the elements that we need to fix. David, you said that you were like knee deep in some like crap teams. Like, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, oh man, it's actually, both of them are, traumatizing in different ways. So, I mean, I think, but so in one case, we were successful in like persevering through it and ultimately shifting the way people thought, shifting culture. And in the other, it was a non-winning situation. And so, I mean, I think the through lines for both are walking into a team where I think they're just more personality driven, right? Way more personality driven. Walking into a team where there are not clear systems of accountability. And when you start to push on accountability, people start to freak out. I think even walking into teams where, again, related, there aren't clear goals, right? And maybe not a true like shared commitment. And that's tough when you work in schools, because that means like kids, right? Young people. I mean, those are, and again, in one case, and I don't really know what the difference is, but in one situation, I walked into a charter school situation that had been falling apart since the beginning. The first 2 years of the school had 2 different leaders in and out. And I came in year 3, and we had 5 years, a 5-year charter renewal. And so, we were successful in that 3 years, refocusing, much better outcomes for kids. The school was renewed. It's still around today. But it was definitely rough. It was rough for sure. And then the other situation, kind of similar, walking in, just like a void of leadership, a lot of like personal kind of like power dynamics, at that time, I just wasn't not fully interested in like, diving into. And so that one didn't last as long as we thought it was going to. But yeah, it's very interested. Like when you walk into those situations as a leader, it is very, I mean, you've created something from the ground up, Omar, right? But when you walk into something that's already been cooking for a while,
dude, that's hard.
Really, really hard work, because you can be the smartest person in the room, but it's really at that point about changing people's hearts and minds. And, who's got time for that?
Ain't nobody got time for that shit, man. Ain't nobody got time for that. Jubilee, do you remember a time when you were like dealt with like toxic leadership or like a terrible team?
Yeah. I mean, it's like 50-11 examples. So I've just put them all into one. And I don't think I was.
Did you say 50-11?
50-11.
That's like a new number. 50-11, yes. Man. That's like 11D. 11.
Exactly. The new Common Core math. Yeah.
There you go.
The good ass math.
I would just combine them all together, right? So, maybe in one example, I was like a teacher. Another, I was a teacher leader or principal in residence. But they all kind of had or exhibited the same kind of traits, right? Lack of trust, apathy. They had experienced some kind of, and I'll call it professional trauma, right? Like people came, people gone, people left, right? People come, people go. There's no stability. And on the other side, it might have been a peaceful place to work, but there was a culture of niceness because there was a lack of trust. So nobody was really giving feedback. So nothing was really growing, right? And no one was really collaborating, right? So I think essentially it just creates a dynamic where you kind of feel suffocated, right? So it's either you're going to keep your head down and keep working and just kind of ignore all the things that are not happening, all the things that are not progressive, all the things that are not working for students, or you could possibly become a martyr by opening your mouth and pushing back against the culture, asking probing questions to get people to think, because that stuff hasn't been cultivated, in these schools or, where I was. So I think I've taken my shot at both, like keep my head down, keep working, but that's just not me. And also like been the martyr and ended up having to just transition, from the space because it's draining after a while. Like nothing is moving. And people are aware of all the toxicity, but they're not necessarily invested in making a change, that matters. They want to they've kind of resolved to get the paycheck and go home. And it's like, what am I going to do about it? That kind of thing. So yes, I've experienced that. And the school I took over was terrible. I chose it though. So I wasn't forced. And it's same reasons, no stability. I was the third leader in 3 years. Parents took their kids out. Teachers resigned after committing to be there for the entire year, all the things. And so I kind of was the martyr, but I won. I won with the team. We won. So.
Yeah, man. I think, look, you both brought up some like exceptionally good components of just like there's a lack of direction, and then there's a lack of self-awareness, and then there's a lack of how to have the leader understand the very like difficult component of team building, because it's not taught. Like, I don't know anyone, like, other than like, if you're like, I don't know, like the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, like business schools don't even teach team building. I mean, they teach you, let's go off to like the Alps and go ski, but there's not like a systemic way of doing team building, right? So there was a time when I was working at some schools in LA, and like, holy smokes, man, like I can't thank them enough for the opportunity to be out there. But like, it was like a really critical lesson in absolutely terrible leadership. You had a leader who was kind of thrust into the position of school leader. This person did not want to be the school leader. So I want to give them a little bit of credence to be like, this person just wanted to be the AP. They had a family, they knew it. They did not want to do this, but it's kind of like we were talking about, Jubilee, where it's like 3 different leaders in 3 different years, because everyone wants to be the boss until they are the boss. Like straight up, dude. Everyone thinks from the armchair how easy it is to lead until you're actually leading and you have no idea what the hell you're doing. So this dude basically got thrust in the position. There was no semblance of organization, meaning he had no idea how to do check-ins with me and anyone else to basically drive, again, the essential question: who is doing what, by when, and how? What are the key elements that we need to get done? And meetings just turned into like just information dumps that were like last 3 hours. And I'm like, Jesus, dude, like meetings, like that, dude, you suck. Like read a book, man. Like there's a way of doing meetings, and meetings should never be to discuss information. And I got to tell you, from Google to the State Department, I just got it confirmed. People are wasting their time on meetings that are just information dumps. That's terrible leadership. Meetings are for making decisions and for understanding who is doing what, by when, and how, and keeping that accountability structure. So like this poor dude basically was like, Omar, like go and figure these things out. I'm like, figure out what, dude? Like all the things that you haven't figured out. His supports were like out to lunch on like, you need to be doing like arts programs and this. And it's like, no, dude, like, how do you teach this person to sit down with his staff, bring it together, and understand who is doing what by when, so that you have like a complete understanding of how all the cognitive pieces work together? The fact that it was a terrible team was predicated on confusion. I don't know what I'm doing or who's telling me what to do. A lack of support. Hey, okay, I need some help here. It was just like everyone was left to their own devices, which creates like, I think like, oh, dude, I love like, yeah, do you see that? Like the balloons came up and shit. And I think that Bill put it best in terms of like, trust is key. Can you, on the private chat, can you pull up that image really quick, David? Hopefully it works. Yeah. So I got to give it up to my man, Patrick Lencioni. He writes the very best books on team building that I think I've ever read. It's mandatory reading at the El Paso Leadership Academy. And the elements of building a successful team is this. And once you see it, it's very simple. When Bill said, dude, trust is key, no one is going to listen, do, or trust anything that a leader says or a team says without building trust. And trust is built on vulnerability. You got to be able to trust the people that they're going to do what's right for the mission and not backstab you, talk shit about you, or like throw you underneath the bus. And like, dude, how many times has that happened in a damn team meeting where everyone's just throwing each other underneath the bus, dude, just to save their own ass instead of just like accepting accountability?
Yep.
Then once you've built trust in a meeting or with a group, you must have conflict. Must have conflict. Conflict means like, Omar, you did not do X, Y, and Z that you promised last week. Someone's got to be able to say that. And it's like, it's right here on the agenda. These were the 3 things that you were in charge of. You're holding us back. Why didn't these 3 things get done? And I can't be like, I'm the CEO, I run shit. Like, screw you, don't put me into a place. It's like, no, dude, like you're part of this team. Like, why did you not do this? And if you're having trouble doing this, like, do we need to be worried? But it's also on the other end. It's like, hey, how do I provide more support to my team to be like, this happened, you didn't do it. What more can I do for you to help you through this, to understand it? It should be less about punishment and more about support. That then leads to commitment, which is who is doing what, by when, and how. That leads to accountability, which everything should be results oriented. What David said, everything should be mission oriented, but results oriented. What's our goal this year? What are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to get a 15% increase in our literacy scores? Are we trying to get 20% more of our students to pass the emerging bilingual exam? We are at a 93% attendance rate. Are we trying to get to 96? If you don't have where you're going, you ain't ever gonna get there. So I just want to kind of take a step back and ask, like, how do you guys reflect upon this structure, and what kind of comments do you have about that? Because I guarantee you've been in places where you've seen both the building of trust and like high levels of accountability, and then just places where everyone's like throwing each other underneath the bus. And by the way, to our audience, like, keep chiming in, man. Keep chiming in.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, right, I gave the example about the two places that I worked, and the teams weren't so pleasant. It was because this whole bottom piece didn't exist, right? Trust did not exist. And so and it's interesting that you say no one teaches you how to do like team building. Omar, you all right over there?
Yes.
What's going on?
All the things. I'm coming back. It's okay.
We're sensing your lack of commitment to the show. Come on.
No, I'm sensing a disaster where I spilled a bunch of stuff and had to clean it up because it was pouring all over me.
It is okay. It's all right. I just wanted to make sure you weren't like getting swallowed by some like creature.
It happens every Tuesday where I get swallowed and spit back up. That's why I look like a Muppet.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I can definitely come rescue you next Tuesday if necessary. But yeah, that whole bottom piece, I don't know that we talk enough about it. And I don't know if we spend enough time, in the education sector kind of building that. And when I was going through my new leaders training years ago, we had a class that we all thought was annoying, and it was called adaptive leadership. And one of the most like magnificent trainers around this work, his name is Brendan O'Day. He had us come into
so much to say about that.
Yeah, he had us come into a room. Our first class was like in a room, was like hundreds of us from across the country in this program. And he gave no direction. Like there was like a chart paper with like a couple of things, and we were upset for the entire day. We did not understand, why would this man have us waste our time? We wanted an agenda, we wanted paper, we wanted to take notes. And he said nothing. We would go up to him and be like,
yeah, I know exactly where he was going with this.
Right. And finally, I mean, this kind of stuff, the adaptive leadership and this idea of building the container, building trust, like pushing the envelope, having those difficult conversations. We had no idea that he cultivated a space that had pushed us to do and question all of those things, because he was a leader in the space that didn't provide any sort of direction. So we kind of experienced what happens as a result of 5 dysfunctions of a team, right? Because he provided literally no direction. We were confused, we were frustrated, all the things. But then that became leverage to teach us what could happen when there is clarity, what could happen when we have clear conversations, what could happen when there is accountability, what could happen when there is vision, and what could happen when you build a safe space. Not so that people can skirt issues or, jump off the bandwagon and act like, not me, it's not my problem, right? But what will happen if, if everyone is engaged, if everyone is committed, like what can happen when we all decide that we're going to galvanize around this mission vision and it's based on trust. So, I mean, that's my thought about that. I think, to your point, Omar, the whole team building piece is something that I really studied and anchored my work in. And one of the ways in which I did that was, and I had a smaller school, so I know somebody would be like, well, I got 1,000 staff members, so I can't. I still think if you have a certain amount of staff members, you should be committing to meeting with folks one-on-one and hitting the ground listening. That will help to increase just the level of connectedness, open the door for vulnerability. I'm not trying to say that I need to know your like family tree and all of that, but it does open up the door for real, authentic conversation where people see you as a human being, you see them as a human being. And then lastly, I'd say to quantify the why. Yes, goals and the results we're looking for, the mission, the vision, but also the why. We got to spend more time talking about the why long term. Why is it important for Johnny to read? Yeah, okay, fine. He'll get a 3 on the test. So what? Like long term, that means that Johnny has a better trajectory at being a successful human being and citizen in the world. He'll be able to have gainful employment, go to whatever college he wants, et cetera, et cetera. So like basically shooting out that vision long term is also a way to like build trust and help folks, understand the why.
Yeah. Damn, dude, this is really good.
David, I think when I look at this pyramid, I immediately think of the 2000s and the era of like no excuses, right? So talking about like as organizations, it's now specifically talking about charter school organizations at that time that were being propped up and being scaled up. That was the word, because they're getting results. But how are you getting results? The one piece of this pyramid was not the absence of trust necessarily within the school, but like maybe the absence of trust in the community, right? So you have charter networks and organizations that are just kind of plopping into different communities, right, without any like community engagement, building trust with partners, building trust with school district, building trust with community-based organizations, right? All of this thing, but super focused on results. And point being is you can't do one without the other. Like, you can be focused on a particular result. You can be focused on accountability, but if you don't have this trust element, if you haven't done the work to authentically engage around building trust, which takes time, right? And it's a different skill set, you're not going to get to your results, right? Regardless of how like well-intentioned you might be. And then the last thing, when I look at this pyramid, I see my own leadership and kind of, which of these 5 kind of levels where, I may have thrived, and which ones where I definitely, had room and still have room to grow. So I think it's a good like self-reflection tool as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I love everything that he's written. I've loved, and most of the books do like the 4, like, it's like the 5 dysfunctions of the team, the 4 obsessions of the executive, the 5 temptations of the CEO. It's the same
Death by meeting.
Yeah, Death by Meeting. Dude, that is the book right there, dude. Like, I love that book. It is a game-changing book. If you've ever had a chance to read Death by Meeting, it will teach you how to organize and structure your meetings so that they actually matter. So that they are decision making and not like freaking information dumping. Which, by the way, again, I can't say this enough. Everyone in our audience can absolutely shake their heads right now, being like, "Oh my God, yes, we're there in that boring ass meeting that like." And you're probably saying this should have been an email. I would actually back up and say I think email is like a dog shit medium. Like everyone's like, as per my email, dude, F your email. You create structures. The way that I eliminate pinchy email is like, we have a weekly check-in. I'm meeting with people one-on-one. Within the agenda, you just put informational items that don't need to be discussed.
Yep.
You dump all the good information in there. And it is your responsibility to put that in there and read everybody else's before the meeting. Everyone thinks the meeting is the work. The meeting isn't the work. You don't get work done in the meeting. The work happens before and after. All the meeting is to make the decisions. Here's the information. You've done the work. What are we deciding? It gets clarified. Who is doing what, by when, and how. And then you do the work after. That cuts your meetings into half the amount of time. No one's spitting out a bunch of like garbage or just listening to themselves talk. You're deciding. And by the way, if you want to know where that came from, Death by Meeting is really the impetus for that book. But really quickly, out of like ego and excitement, Jubilee, you mentioned adaptive leadership. I got to tell you, I'm all about adaptive leadership. They put you into that room to put you to that exercise to show you this is what happens when no one steps up into a leadership process. It is conflict and chaos. Who is going to step up to organize others to achieve common purpose? There are 2 people that I want to recommend that people read. The person who invented adaptive leadership theory was my professor in grad school, a guy named Ron Heifetz. Heifetz, man. Get that book. It's called Adaptive Leadership. It'll change your life.
Yeah.
And then he wrote all that with a guy named Linsky. So Linsky gets a ton of credit. The 2 of them invented that ideology. It's big time. And then if you ever get a chance to read anything by Marshall Gans invented my the best definition of leadership is the one that he invented, which is you are a leader will accept responsibility to empower others, to achieve common purpose in the face of uncertainty. To accept the responsibility. It's like the chaos that you had in your class, right? You believe no one knew who the leader was. I'm going to accept responsibility to organize others. And instead of organizing others, organize and empower others. To achieve common purpose, what are we all doing together? What is the goal? What is the mission? Where are we headed? What is the thing that we're all doing that's bigger than us? And Bill said academic achievement. Yes, dude. We are here to academically advance students to put them into a position where they're going to be highly successful, both as people and as adults. In the face of uncertainty, we don't know what's going to happen. So we're going to have to deal with like random shit coming out of the woodwork that's going to exactly distract us from our focus. Well said, Bill. So yeah. I would highly recommend folks get into that. But like, that's my closing thought. We're at closing thoughts, man. We got like 3.5 minutes, man. Damn, the show went real quick.
Yeah,
that was good stuff. Yeah.
I'll go. I got something top of mind. I think looking back on your, going back to the team of rivals concept, what team makeup contributes to success. Looking at the different elements of that, like the one thing that I'm not seeing, and the one thing that we haven't necessarily talked about, but I want to call out, maybe for another show, would be again, and this is part of the servant kind of leadership. How can I work my way out of a job? Is the power of a leader and the ability of a leader to be able to identify leaders on their team, people that don't even see themselves as leaders, right?
Yes.
So I see what Jubilee's doing. I see what Omar's doing. I'm going to start to have a conversation with them, and they're going to be like, me? No, I'm just doing my thing. I'm like, well, how do we cultivate that leadership in other people? I think is good topic for a future show.
I agree. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah.
For sure. Great show. It's like one of my favorite topics. I mean, I'm still on the trust train, right? So I think this whole idea of like building trust and like really being intentional about it, I think is something that, in a leadership position you should work on, and in life you should work on. And I do think that it goes both ways, right? Like I want to be able to earn the trust of the people that I'm working with. But I also want them to know that they have mine, because I think that in and of itself, to a word that you used earlier, Omar, is empowering, to know that I'm in an environment. I am a professional. I am perceived as a professional, and I am trusted as a professional. I think in our sector, sometimes that gets missed, where teachers, right, or secondary leaders, or even school leaders may not feel as if they are treated with respect and as professionals who can make sound decisions. So I think one of the greatest gifts that we could give as leaders is to let the people know that we are partnering with them and that we trust their judgment. Of course, it has to be demonstrated through a series of things, but I think that's one of the things that I was able to leverage when I was a school leader. Right. So an example is like how I provided a lot of PD around data when I first took my school over. I had just done the same thing when I was assistant principal, and we did all the PD, and we had a lot of intensive training around it one-on-one. And then one day I was doing, maybe let's say about 3 months after, I was doing instructional rounds, just seeing how people are implementing the systems, using DDI, etc. And my teachers, they were done. They had their graphs. They did all of the analysis. They had regrouped their kids and all of that. And that was kind of them working me out of a job there. I didn't need to provide any more intensive PD. And at that point, they had my trust because they understood the why. They collaborated as a team, and they did what was best for students without even having my voice in the room. And I think when we have those kinds of moments, then we win, because we've empowered others, and now they are doing the work that's empowering our our students. That makes me smile when I put my head down, you know, on my pillow at night. So.
Oh yeah. Man, what a hell of a note to end on, ladies and gentlemen. This has been the South Star Classroom. We can't thank you enough. A lot of great participation today, Bill. Damn, man, you got a lot to say. We appreciate you immensely, and thank you for your kind words. To our audience, we love hearing from you. So definitely come in. We'll do our best to kind of get those topics out. So like KJ Freeman, man, outstanding piece of advice. Get that out. Y'all can prepare. You can come in with comments. We love seeing them. Remember, South Star, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you next week. Take care. Peace, everybody. If this balloons come up, oh, you look at that.